Today, DA Bragg's office consented to a 30-day delay in the start of the trial, but not because DA Bragg needs another month. The issue at hand is a new trove of records that were turned over by the feds, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Specifically, 31,000 pages of records that the U.S. Attorney's Office just handed over to Bragg's office yesterday. Now, the DA specifically pins this newest delay on Trump, saying that Trump's legal team waited until just 2 months ago to request this massive trove of records from the U.S. Attorney's Office. And don't get me wrong, I am sure Trump's legal team is using every opportunity that exists to create delays in this case. It is what they do. But DA Bragg's office and the U.S. Attorney's Office know that. And one of the reasons this appears to be happening so late in the game is because the U.S. Attorney's Office requested repeated extensions that Trump's side consented to, according to DA Bragg. When the New York Times asked the U.S. Attorney's Office for comment on the delay, the office declined to respond. Joining me now are former FBI General Counsel Andrew Weissmann and NYU law professor Melissa Murray. Together, they are the authors of the brand new #1 Not Bad Guys, New York Times bestseller, The Trump Indictments, the Historic Charging Documents with Commentary. I first, Andrew, have to get your opinion on what's happened here in the New York hush money case, because on the outside, yes, I understand Trump's doing everything he can to delay, but what's going on here with the Department of Justice and their ability to get the DA and the defendants the documents they need in a timely fashion?
So self-inflicted wound, it doesn't look good, especially when we're about to get a decision on DA Fani Willis. Even if there's a decision not to disqualify her, the combination looks really poor. At the very least, this is a massive screw up on the part of the Southern District of New York prosecutors. I mean, really poor judgment not to have turned everything over a year ago when the DA's office asked for this information. If you've got inculpatory information, you should turn that over. If you've got exculpatory information that could help the defendant, you need to turn that over. So it was just a bad decision. I'm very focused not on this isn't going to be fatal to the case. There will be a trial. I'm very focused on what the information is. One thing to note is that the DA's submission today said that there's still more to come. So it's worth knowing. They do not yet know, neither side, not the DA nor the defense knows exactly what the full scope is. I think that there could be information that's additional bad acts by Michael Cohen. Remember, Michael Cohen had pled guilty there, and the Southern District of New York prosecutors had publicly said at the plea hearing how much they distrusted him. They were very much fighting with our office, the special counsel's office. We were saying he should get credit. They were saying, no, he shouldn't. So there could be more information about that. There could be more information about Allen Weisselberg, because reading the tea leaves, it appears that Allen Weisselberg may have given information to them, may have even testified in the grand jury, but may have lied. And
he has already pled guilty to perjury. So
exactly, but there could be just more complications there. There also could be discussions about the theory of the case, of the federal campaign violation case. Why do I say that? Because if you remember, let's go back in the time machine to when Bill Barr was the Attorney General and was fighting with the acting U.S. Attorney, Audrey Strauss, saying that you should essentially get rid of the case, and she pushed back. So there could just be a whole mass of material, and that's what I'm sort of keeping my eye on, is sort of like, what is the information, and is it going to be something that's really meaningful? Exactly.
What I don't fundamentally understand is, and this is according to DA Bragg, he asked for a lot of this material last year and didn't get it, and then Trump asks for it in January, and so far 103,000, I think, is the count. Pages of documents have been turned over. I mean, what might possibly account for that?
Well, I think one thing you have to understand is, although all of these U.S. attorneys' offices are part of the Federal Department of Justice, they're prosecutorial offices working under the Department of Justice, they all enjoy a fair amount of autonomy. I mean, the Southern District of New York is also colloquially known as the Sovereign District of New York, and they take that sovereignty quite seriously. And so, yes, they don't always play well with other offices, state-level prosecutions. Like, they're doing their own thing quite a lot of the time. And this may be one of those situations. I think the thing to take from all of this is that This delay is not necessarily Alvin Bragg's fault. He definitely asked for this information a year ago. It wasn't forthcoming.
Yeah.
Now it's been disclosed, and apparently it is an avalanche of documents with more to come. And he's done the right thing, which is to concede that there should be a delay. He has pushed back on the defendant's request for a 90-day delay. He's requested a 30-day delay. That's sufficient time to go through these documents. But he has prioritized the rights of this defendant to have an opportunity to review these documents against him, review the documents that may have information about those who will be testifying against him, and present the most vigorous defense that he can. And that's exactly what he should be doing.
Well, yeah, and I think he's the one saying a 30-day delay would be fine by me. Like, I could do the final today, but I could also take it in a month when I've had time to prepare for it. What would account for, first of all, they were asked for this material last year. Then they're asked for it again in January. And then they're still saying, we need more time, we need more time, we need more time. And now it's the eve of, the trial beginning effectively, and they're still not done giving documents. How does that process, does that seem plausible to you? How does the process work that it might be so greatly slowed?
Well, the one thing that I don't think happened is I don't think that Maine Justice was involved. It could be, but I just don't think that's the case. I agree with Melissa that U.S. Attorney's offices can, in a lot of circumstances, particularly in the Southern District of New York, just decide this on their own. That doesn't answer your question. That just sort of deals with, was Merrick Garland somehow part of this? And as we've discussed, I have my issues in terms of the speed or lack thereof with respect to the Attorney General, but I don't think this is something I would immediately jump to him. It's hard to know how this could happen. I can tell you that my reaction, and friends who either had worked in the DA's office or worked in the U.S. Attorney's office all had the same reaction, which is not something I could say on air.
On this family program?
Yeah. And because it is either just a colossal blunder or just such a wrong view in terms of the judgment call here, in terms of what needs to be done. And the idea that it so clearly took Alvin Bragg by surprise meant this normally, at the very least, if you thought you had a huge cache of documents, you would call up the DA and say, you know what, we just found, or something just happened.
Just found 100,000
But it's clear
documents.
that didn't happen. This was, to me, it's pretty clear
But that's
there's an
notable
intention.
too. I think that is notable too. Donald Trump has been saying throughout all of these investigations and now these indictments that all of these various law enforcement officials are working in tandem. This is a collusive effort to selectively prosecute him. This makes clear that that is not the case.
Yeah.
The Southern District of New York is not working with Alvin Bragg.
Wildly dysfunctional, not coordinating anything.
Yes. Exactly. Complete dysfunction, but certainly not the collusion that he has implied.
Not a great defense, of course.
No, not the best defense.
They're so dysfunctional that they can't be colluding. Andrew, I got to push back a little bit. I'm not suggesting that Merrick Garland was the puppeteer of, dropping 100,000 pieces of paper in Alvin Bragg's lap and Donald Trump's lap. But I do think, this is a week where Robert Hur has gone to the Hill with this highly controversial report that the White House said, that I think a lot of folks, not even just Democrats, say was filled with just, out-of-school commentary about President Biden's mental acuity. The mere appointment of Robert Hur was a subject of debate. And then what he came up with seemed so just political in nature and not to the support of the current occupant of the White House. It all serves to paint a picture of a Justice Department that seems sort of hopelessly concerned with how they're going to be perceived on the right.
So I agree with that. I'm trying to be sort of, judicious about taking each set of circumstances at the same time and looking at them to give them sort of fair weight. I agree with you with Rob Hur. I think that is a small p political decision. I think it was done to not have criticism. So you appoint someone who's a Republican. I think that is a massive mistake. I think it buys into the idea that special counsels can act out of principle. And if you appoint Rob Hur, that's what you get. So I think it is absolutely right to be critical of that decision. And I think it's important because I think it deals with sort of what would happen next. It's like an important milestone to say, you know what, this is what you get if you don't actually back your people in thinking that anybody, judges, prosecutors, jurors, witnesses will act out of principle. I just think in this situation, I don't know what was motivating the Southern District of New York. I just don't think they would have coordinated this. I do think Merrick Garland, he may make wrong decisions, but I do not see him trying to slow this down by saying, do not turn inculpatory information over to prosecutors and exculpatory information. The prosecutor is going to want us to know both of those and will feel like he has an obligation to turn over both of those things to the defense.
But I think to Alex's point, though, Merrick Garland should have been writing all of these prosecutors in these U.S. attorneys' offices below him, like Seabiscuit, to get this done, right? I mean, like, so there is, I think, a failure of leadership here. I mean, just
right. If not
you
nefarious.
are the department. Yeah, it doesn't have to be nefarious to be problematic. Like, he's in charge, and they report to him. Like, this needed to be done. The defendant had a right to this information. Why did it take so long? And so, no, I agree that this may likely fall with the office, but the buck ultimately stops with Merrick Garland.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I just think the chances that Merrick Garland knew, I mean, he may have been reading it the same way we did. And of course, you're right to be like, you know what, he runs the office. Ultimately, he's totally responsible. But, you know, at the U.S. Attorney's Office, the idea that this wouldn't be turned over, I'm pretty sure that to the extent that they didn't know at Main Justice, their reaction was probably the same as all of ours, which was, you've got to be kidding.
Yeah, you've got to be kidding is my refrain for this block of television tonight.